Sharif, I've been playing Horizon Forbidden West on PC. It's a game that I have on PS5, but largely skipped, just because there's so many things going on. It's always a game that releases alongside like other things that are more interesting. But, you know, it's a great showcase for current gen hardware as it was on PS5. But what it really shows off, firstly, it's a great port and it supports DLSS 3 frame gen. Even though there's no ray tracing going on in it, you still get the opportunity to leverage the features of 40 series Nvidia GPUs to just get those frames, man. I've shown you some footage of the game running at 4K natively without DLSS or anything, and it still manages a pretty consistent 60, right? And it looks really nice, yeah? And then I showed you some footage of DLSS 3 turned on with frame gen running and all of that. So this is a current game. This is a port from a PS5 game, and on PS5 you have to make the choice between, do you want this experience optimized for resolution or frame rate, you know? And that's the classic console dichotomy at the moment. It's like, would you want it to look at its best or do you want it to feel at its best? You can't have both, right?
And most games don't even offer the option now.
Exactly. Like, you know, yeah, Dragon's Dogma, for example, is just like, you're just gonna take it as we give it to you, which is, you know, at a unreasonable 35 to 40 frames a second. What I love about this particular port is that you've got all these options that you can tweak. And when it's running on 4070 Super GPU, we're running on an MSI card supplied by Nvidia for this test. It's just uncompromised, which is probably the best word for it. It's completely, you can run everything at max. In fact, you can go over the max because with GeForce Experience, you can put the anisotropic filtering up to 16 times, which you can't in the in-game options. So it's running like slightly better than best. And I'm getting like a really consistent sort of 95 frames a second at 4K. So when you've got this plugged into a 4K G-Sync screen, like you're playing the absolute best version of this game possible. And it's supposed to be a PlayStation exclusive, so that's, you know, if you're a PC gamer, it's a good time to be alive.
It is really the definitive way to play that game. Looking at all the options that you have, like the presentation is going to look superior because, like you mentioned, you wouldn't have to sacrifice anything. Obviously, the assumption is that you have a modern 40 series Nvidia GPU because that's what you can do. But DLSS frame generation is the thing that lets you really push past the limits of your GPU and the limits of your hardware by generating these frames based on data from the frame before and the frame after. It gives it a smoothness that, based on tech, that is just beyond anything available on console. And you don't have to sacrifice visual clarity, and you don't have to do anything that you would otherwise do on console. But best of all, you could just plug in a PlayStation 5 controller, a DualSense, and get the same benefits of having it on a PlayStation 5. So it's almost really like cheating. It feels like cheating.
It does feel like cheating. It feels like you've kind of hacked reality itself to be like, I want to be playing this on PS6, but I want to be doing it now in 2024.
Yes.
Right? It's mad. We've got the PS5 Pro on the way, and which is going to be a great bit of kit. And not to disparage the PS5 Pro, not to disparage console gaming in general. I love consoles. You know, I'm probably still actually going to get a PS5 Pro because I've got that sort of brain. But playing this on the 4070 Super, which is not the highest end GPU. I mean, I would bill it as a mid-range card.
It's an upper mid-range, for sure.
Yeah, upper mid-range, and it's absolutely like knocking the socks off everything I throw at it. And it's really convinced me that, like, do I need a PS5 Pro? Like, you know, I don't need this to run better on a PlayStation because it runs perfectly now on the PC. So I don't know. It's a very weird place we're in the gaming market at the moment. But the bottom line is, if you're playing on PC, you're just getting the best version of everything.
If you're willing to wait a little bit.
Long story short, completely bowled away by how great the port looks on PC, how much visual information is in every single frame here is actually like, how would you describe it if you had your sensationalist headline on, Sharif? Would you use the phrase retina searing detail?
Retina searing.
Because that's what it is. You've got just visual information just being pumped into your eyes at a rate that you just don't get with consoles.
No.
With the best will in the world. it's a real leap forward. And given that it's pretty clear that the next gen of consoles is probably going to have these types of technologies in them, DLSS style upscaling and DLSS style frame gen, it's probably not going to be those exact things because the consoles tend to run on AMD hardware. Yes. But like, given that everyone's going in that direction, what's in the frame buffer is more of a set of guidelines for what the AI is going to do to upscale it all. This is basically a glimpse into the future. It's like, this is what games are going to run like, and they're going to feel uncompromised going forward. That was the dream with this current gen of consoles. People were excited about the idea that like, hey, we're going to be able to get like 4K and 60 FPS. We're not going to have to choose. That has not panned out.
Well, only for like the first year. And we should mention that like even a lot of the stuff that we're talking about might not immediately come across in the video because YouTube compression is going to knock down the detail. But as if you've ever played a DLSS game, the technology is so far ahead of the competition and it is so exceptional at replicating it that it just sometimes it doesn't make sense not to use it, which is something that I would have never said about an upscaling technology, especially if I have the horsepower to run it natively. But by saving up some of that power to increase the frame rate instead of increasing the detail, because you've already taken care of the detail, you're putting everything out on max, DLSS allows you that headroom, right? And the other thing with frame generation is that that's never going to appear on a YouTube video. You have to experience it yourself, that the game is going to feel smoother, that the frame rate is going to be higher on your screen. So that's one of the things just to keep in mind. But even with those caveats, it is still ahead of anything else. And it is, as you mentioned, it's a preview, it's a window into the future, a preview of like what the PS6 or whatever is going to have, because you better believe they're going to have some sort of either frame generation or some AI assisted. We're already hearing about the stuff coming in with the PS4 Pro, the PS5 Pro, excuse me. This is the power that probably when this game gets remastered on a PS7 or a PS6, this is like the Horizon collection on the PS6 is going to probably look like this. That you have now. And
here it is, we're playing it now. When you're getting future-proofed games, like which I believe Horizon absolutely is, a scalable engine, clearly designed in terms of its art direction with enough kind of detail in the image that can come through when it's running on better hardware. Stuff like, to go back to Dragon's Dogma 2 again, that is running at an unlocked frame rate on the current gen of hardware, and I think that is a very calculated decision, because as soon as the Pro consoles start coming out, as soon as we start talking about the next gen, it's going to have an automatic advantage on those machines. I think they've done that very deliberately. You're looking at a future where not only are the machines uncompromised, but like the developers themselves are uncompromised as well. They don't have to worry so much about optimization because a lot of that is going to be taken into account. So it's good news for everyone, really. It's good news even if you are like a normal person who doesn't work for an enthusiast website and doesn't have access to like 40 series hardware.
Don't have an impact on the consoles and everyone else on the competition, because you look at what other companies are doing in the PC space alone, they're trying to catch up to DLSS. And you look at what Sony's doing with the PS5 Pro, according to the reporting, they're trying to build a version of DLSS. Like it or not, this is going to, even if you don't own an Nvidia GPU at all, or a PC, a lot of that is going to trickle down, and a version of that is going to come to you, and we're just going to have to see if it's as good as DLSS.
Even in this use case, you can see that frame generation gives you an enormous benefit. It allows you to take advantage of the high refresh rate displays that we have on PCs. You know, if I've got an LG TV with G-Sync and it can do 120 hertz and stuff like that, and it's been underutilized because you can get certain games to run at 120 hertz on PlayStation, but then it cuts down to like 1080p or whatever, and you think, well, 60 is good enough, right? Well, nothing has to be good enough with this, because it's like, hey, I'm hovering around 115 frames a second. It doesn't have to be exactly 120 because you've got G-Sync picking up the slack there, and then like the machine doesn't have to render all those frames, because frame generation is filling in any in-between frames it needs to, and it doesn't need to run at 4K natively because it basically looks like it does, and unless you're like a mad person on Reddit, like it's not going to matter to you whether it is actually or not. And once again, I'm absolutely blown away by it.
Yeah, I think it's, as we mentioned earlier, it feels like cheating. It feels like you're getting everything that you want, and on the other end of that, it feels like looking into the future of like, okay, trying to imagine what the 50 series is going to be, and trying to imagine what the PS6 is going to be and the PS7 if they make it to that. And it's just like, it's a fascinating thing. That's the power of PC.
The upshot is sell your PS5 and get a 47 Super.